Piers Morgan thought he could rattle Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett with a smug jab. What he didn't expect was the silence after her first answer, the kind that hangs in the air just before the crowd explodes in applause. They'd told her it would be fair. Just a thoughtful exchange on civil rights, her chief of staff had said when they booked it. He wants a strong voice. He'll be respectful. But the moment Jasmine Crockett walked into the studio in Burbank that Thursday morning, something felt off. Not loud, just wrong. The kind of wrong you only notice when you've been in rooms like this before. The makeup artist didn't speak. The staff glanced, then looked away. The assistant producer barely nodded back. It wasn't tension, it was expectation. A room waiting for something to go wrong. Piers Morgan was already seated when she arrived. He didn't stand, just nodded, eyes flicking to his notes. She took her seat, adjusted her mic, and offered a polite smile. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning, Congresswoman Crockett," he replied, smiling without warmth. "Let's have a spirited conversation. Shall we? Live in 30 seconds. Jasmine straightened slightly in her chair. Reflex. She was used to being underestimated. The daughter of a cafeteria worker and a truck driver raised in Shreveport, sharpened by law school and courtrooms in Dallas. She had fought too hard to shrink now. Lights up, finger point, cue the music. "Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored," he announced with his trademark snap. "Today, we're joined by Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a rising star in the Democratic Party, and someone with, let's say, very vocal opinions on race, justice, and American policing." "Thank you for having me," she replied, calm and centered. He didn't wait. "Congresswoman, you've been extremely outspoken about what you call systemic racism in America, but this country elected a black president twice. We now have a black female vice president. Doesn't that prove we've made enormous progress?" It was the classic trap. Show the illusion of equality, then dare someone to challenge it. Jasmine didn't blink. "Progress doesn't erase what's still broken, Mr. Morgan," she said. "It just means we've come far enough to keep pushing," he smirked. "You've described some police policies as state-sponsored brutality. Isn't that a little emotionally driven?" The words lingered, just long enough for the insult to land. She paused. Let the silence stretch. "I'm emotionally driven," she said finally, "when I see mothers burying sons who never made it to 20. Yes, I feel things. That doesn't make me irrational. It makes me human. But I didn't come here with feelings. I came with facts." But Morgan wasn't looking for facts. He was hunting for a viral clip. He leaned in. "And do those facts ever include personal accountability?" Jasmine narrowed her eyes, just slightly. "Absolutely. But let's not pretend the system treats all accountability the same. We both know it doesn't." The control room was still. Floor director tense. The interview was already veering off script. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't flailing. She was composed, leaving him with nothing to spin into outrage porn. But then he went for the throat. Morgan adjusted his tie, feigned a page turn. Jasmine saw it for what it was, staged, planned, laced with bite. "Let's be real," he said, gaze steady. "Isn't it exhausting, constantly painting America as the villain? There's a difference between healthy criticism and, well, bitterness." The word dropped like a blade. Bitterness. It wasn't just about her policies. It was about her tone, her character, her right to be angry. Jasmine didn't flinch. "If you think calling out injustice is bitterness," she said, voice low and level, "then maybe you've gotten too comfortable being part of the audience." He froze, jaw tight. That one hit. She leaned in slightly, controlled, clear. "You can't praise Dr. King every January," she said, "and then call people bitter in June for pointing at the exact same walls." And just like that, the room went quiet, except for the sound of the audience, applauding. He did. A quiet rippled through the audience, not loud, but unmistakable. Piers forced a smile. "You're clearly passionate," he said, stretching the word like it was a warning. "I respect that, but don't you think this constant race-based lens just divides people further? Wouldn't we be better off moving past it?" Jasmine shook her head gently. "That's like telling someone to stop mentioning the rain while they're standing in a thunderstorm." He chuckled, thin and dry. "Clever." Then he shifted. The smile faded. "But let's get serious. You once criticized law enforcement after a high-profile shooting. The officer was cleared. Yet you never walked back your comments. Doesn't that suggest you jumped the gun? Reacted before the facts came out?" Her face didn't change. But inside, a familiar knot twisted. Not fear, disappointment. There it was, the setup, the narrative he wanted. Race first, facts later. Something he could package for a headline. Crockett ignores evidence. She waited. Just long enough to show. She wasn't rattled. "Tell me something, Mr. Morgan," she said softly. "Do you believe a system that clears officers 99% of the time is automatically just? Or is it possible, just possible, that the system itself needs scrutiny?" He opened his mouth, but she didn't stop. "Because if you're using clearance, rates to claim innocence, maybe you should revisit what happened in Mississippi last year? 2 unarmed black teens shot during a routine stop. No body cam. Officers cleared in days. That wasn't justice. That was a cover-up." The room held its breath. Receipts, names, numbers, a reality check he couldn't smirk away. Piers looked down and flipped a page on his notepad. It was blank, stalling. Jasmine leaned in. Just slightly. "You want to talk about facts?" "Let's talk. I don't come here with slogans. I come prepared." The studio thickened with stillness. Even the makeup artist off stage froze, brush midair, eyes locked on the monitor, but Piers wasn't finished. "I just think," he said slowly, "it's dangerous to keep telling young black Americans they're victims. Doesn't that limit them more than the system ever could?" That's when Jasmine stopped smiling. She placed her hands gently on the desk. No anger, no raised voice. "What's dangerous," she said, "is telling young black Americans to stay quiet about their pain. What's dangerous is pretending resilience means silence." Her voice stayed level, calm like a storm about to land. "We've been resilient, we've been strong, and we've also been ignored until we screamed." A low yes rose from the back. Someone clapped, once, then stopped, unsure. But the shift had begun. "Sure," she continued, tilting her head. "We could. Tell them to move on. Pretend it's all fine. Pretend none of it ever happened." She looked at Piers. "That would be more comfortable, wouldn't it?" He blinked, didn't speak, and Jasmine knew. He wasn't driving the interview anymore. He was reacting to it. Then, she saw it coming. Before he even opened his mouth, the shift in his posture, the faux generous smile, the kind that always comes before a hit cloaked in civility. "Congresswoman," he began, voice syrupy, "you say you're bringing facts, but let's be honest. Your tone, your body language, your social media, everything screams emotion. You come across as angry, not analytical, and people watching, they notice." There it was. Angry, not assertive, not passionate, not direct, angry. It was a classic move. Use it when a woman, especially a black woman, refuses to shrink. Jasmine didn't respond. Not right away. She didn't need to. The room felt it. Heavy, uncomfortable. A camera operator shifted. Someone backstage winced. She let the silence hold. Then, with perfect calm, "Do you ask Senator Burr the same thing when he yells on your show and pounds the desk?" Piers blinked. "Do you stop the interview," she continued, "to critique his body language?" Silence. "Or is passion only a problem when it comes from someone like me?" She wasn't yelling. She wasn't shaking. She was dissecting him, quietly, precisely. You think I come across angry? She said. But that's only because I'm not backing down. I don't speak with your accent. I don't ask permission to feel things. And just like that, the floor shifted. Again. But I promise you, she said, calm and steady, nothing I've said today is based on emotion. It's based on experience. A few chuckles scattered across the audience, not mocking but sharp, electric. She got him. Even Piers laughed, though his eyes had narrowed. Oh, I see, he said. So now we're going after my background? No, Jasmine replied, voice smooth. You went after mine. I'm just reminding you, I don't need your permission to speak or to challenge you. You invited me here to talk. Don't act surprised when I actually do. His smirk cracked. She kept going. I've spent years in courtrooms, Piers. You know what doesn't hold up under scrutiny? Tone, eyebrows, social media posts. You know what does? Evidence. So let's stick to that. He opened his mouth but didn't get the chance. And since you brought up social media, she continued, let's talk about yours. He froze. You tweeted last year that kneeling during the national anthem was attention-seeking theater. That's your right. But I have to ask, what were you seeking when you stormed off your own show in 2021 after being challenged on your comments about Meghan Markle? The room gasped, not dramatic, just real shock. She'd gone there, and she wasn't done. Call it a meltdown, call it a moment of honesty. Either way, it wasn't analytical, it was emotional. And yet here you sit, still playing the role of the adult in the room. Piers didn't move. His face held neutral. But something had shifted. For the first time all segment, he looked smaller in his chair. You asked me if I'm bitter, Jasmine said. I'm not, but I am tired. Tired of proving I belong at every table. Tired of explaining pain. Tired of being measured by standards. That shift depending on who's watching. She paused. Let the silence land heavy. No one clapped. No one breathed too loud. Then, tap, tap, he started fiddling with his pen. Well, he said, voice a bit tighter now. You've clearly prepared a few zingers. She didn't smile. No. I came prepared with the truth. If that feels like a zinger, maybe that says more about you than me. But she wasn't finished. She could feel the moment thickening, and she wasn't about to let him shift the narrative back. Piers gripped his pen tighter. The camera didn't catch it, but Jasmine did. A small giveaway. A man used to steering the conversation, realizing the wheel was slipping. He tried to rally. Congresswoman, I think we're veering off. This isn't about me. You're here to answer for your positions, not question mine. She raised an eyebrow. Not performative. Just enough to say, oh, that's where we're going now. Then she leaned in, voice still measured. You said earlier that my views divide people. That I'm emotional, that I push a victimhood narrative. You made it personal the moment you framed my humanity as a flaw. And now that I'm answering you with facts you didn't expect, you want to pivot? He blinked. No answer. She didn't wait. You want to talk about division? Let's rewind. Last year you called protesters in Minneapolis a mob of violent agitators. But 6 months later, when truckers in Idaho blocked roads over vaccine mandates, you praised them as patriotic citizens taking a stand. A low hum from the audience. Third row, a woman covered her mouth. Piers shifted. Well, those were two different... Were they? She cut in, gently. Both were protesting what they saw as unjust government action. One group got tear gas, the other got sympathetic headlines. One was dangerous, the other brave. She locked eyes with him. Tell me, Mr. Morgan, what's the difference? He opened his mouth, closed it again. No safe way out. She pressed on. You've made a career out of provoking outrage. But the moment someone holds up your own words, suddenly, it's a lecture about decorum and structure. That's not consistency. That's convenience. His face twitched just once. A flash of something behind the eyes. Frustration, embarrassment, and still, Jasmine continued. When George Floyd died, she said, voice low but unshakable. You posted that America needs to do better. And I agreed. I really did. She let that hang. Just long enough. But 3 weeks later, you criticized black athletes for kneeling. You said politics doesn't belong in sports. A pause. But somehow, she finished, outrage always belongs on your timeline. A soft chuckle floated from somewhere behind the cameras. Jasmine didn't flinch. You want the symbolism, she said, not the resistance, the tragedy, not the noise that follows. You want black grief to be poetic, not disruptive. That line landed like a gut punch. Even the studio lights seemed to dim with it. Piers looked at her, not with defiance or smugness, but something unfamiliar. Embarrassment, maybe. Recognition, even. She didn't seize the moment for drama. She let it breathe. I don't need to be liked, she said. That's never been the point. But I will be heard, even if I have to drag the truth into rooms that were never built for it. A quiet round of claps began. 1, then 2, then more. Not a standing ovation. Just a room realizing it had heard something true. Piers tried to smirk. Well, you certainly came prepared with your notes. Jasmine turned to him, steady. No, she said. I came with my experience. You call it notes, because you didn't expect someone like me to be this ready. Silence in the control room. The producer stood mid-motion, hand frozen halfway to the console, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let it roll. She wasn't waiting. Jasmine pivoted, speaking not just to Piers now, but to the viewers at home, the ones who had been dismissed, talked over, waved off by someone who sounded confident but never listened. This platform, she said, reaches far beyond this studio. So let's talk facts, since that's supposed to be the standard. She turned slightly toward the camera. Real ones. Piers exhaled through his nose, leaning back like he was unbothered. But under the desk, his knee bounced. I brought 3 examples, she continued. Not headlines, not viral threads, court records, depositions, public footage. The tension thickened. This was no off-the-cuff retort. This was precision, honed and intentional, the kind of truth sharpened by grief and time. Case 1. Pasadena, California, 2021. Aaron Lowe, 27 years old, pulled over for a busted taillight on his way home from work. Dashcam shows his hands were up the entire time. Shot twice. Officer claimed he thought Aaron was reaching. Internal review cleared him. But here's the part that matters. Body cam footage went missing for 6 months, then reappeared. Edited. She let it land. No dramatics, just the truth, unvarnished. Case 2. Cleveland, Ohio. Last summer. Rhonda Belton called 911. Her ex was trying to break into her apartment. Police arrived. They arrested her for disorderly conduct. She paused. Why? Because she was yelling. She spent 3 days in county, lost her job, charges dropped, no apology, no news coverage, just silence. Piers finally stirred. Congresswoman, I don't dispute those are serious. She cut in, calm but firm. You do dispute them when you ask if I'm being emotional, when you call my tone angry. What you're really saying is that people like Rhonda, like Aaron, don't count, unless their pain shows up in a tone you find palatable. He felt quiet. Jasmine didn't pause. One more, she said, pulling a folded page from her jacket. Not for theatrics. For proof. Case 3. Your quote, March 2022. On this very show, you said, and I quote, I don't believe institutional racism exists in modern policing. Piers cleared his throat. That was just days after a Department of Justice report showed disproportionate use of force against black drivers in 8 major U.S. cities, including Los Angeles. He started. Well, the context, I know the context, she said, lifting her hand. I read the full transcript. You said the report wasn't conclusive, but it included numbers, body cam footage, and sworn testimony. What you... meant was, it wasn't convenient for your narrative. Now the audience was locked in, phones out, heads slowly nodding. Not everyone agreed. But they all knew she wasn't bluffing. She turned back to him, voice even. I'm not here to go viral. I'm not here for applause. I'm here because I represent people who bury their kids while TV hosts argue over how angry we're allowed to look when we grieve. A low murmur passed through the crowd. Some leaned forward, breath caught. Facts, she said, aren't weapons. They're windows. And some of us have spent our whole lives pressed up against the glass, waiting to be seen. But ignoring them, dismissing them, that's where the damage begins. Piers looked stuck now. The fire he'd walked in with had dulled. This wasn't a sparring match anymore. It was a lesson. Jasmine let a softness slip into her voice, just enough to disarm, not deflect. You can disagree with my tone, my approach, even my politics, but what you can't do is pretend I came here empty-handed or act surprised when I hold you to your own words. The studio fell still. No pivot, no scripted interruption, just that rare, charged silence that happens when the truth lands too clean to dodge. But it wasn't the silence that shifted things. It was what she said next. Behind the cameras, a producer pressed his earpiece. We need to cut to break, he whispered. The director didn't blink. Eyes locked to the monitor, he waved him off. This wasn't chaos. It was history. And everyone in the control room knew it. Chatter died. The senior network execs, there, for a routine check-in, stayed glued to their seats. No one moved. No one even breathed too loud. The cameraman on Jasmine's left adjusted his focus, slowly, shakily, 16 years behind the lens, and he'd never seen this before. Not someone crack a public figure open without shouting, posturing, or grandstanding. Just precision. In the audience, a man in a gray hoodie leaned forward and whispered, "She's cooking him," low enough to earn a quiet ripple of laughter around him. But Piers Morgan wasn't laughing. His eyes darted off stage, toward his producer, now frantically gesturing. Stretch or salvage, depending on who you asked. Jasmine didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't care. She calmly adjusted her lapel mic, not performing, just prepared. Steady, unbothered. No sweat, no cracks, not even a blink out. Of place. Piers tried to reclaim ground. "Congresswoman," he said, the formality back in his voice, "I think there's a distinction between anecdotal incidents and systemic patterns. Wouldn't you agree?" A flicker of a smile played at the corners of her mouth. Of course there is. That's why I didn't bring stories. I brought federal reports, body cam footage, judicial data. So if you think those are anecdotes, maybe your bar for evidence is just different. Someone behind camera 2 snorted. But Jasmine wasn't, gloating. That's what made it hit harder. She wasn't enjoying his discomfort. She just didn't need to protect it. What moved people wasn't just what she knew, it was how calmly she carried it. Then came the moment no one scripted. A studio assistant, young, probably fresh out of Fresno State, forgot himself, clapped. Twice. Just pop, pop. Soft, echoed across the rafters. Piers heard it, and that was the first real crack. "Is this a talk show or a rally now?" he snapped, eyes shifting sharply off stage. Jasmine didn't even flinch. "Neither," she said. "It's a moment of accountability, something we don't get enough of, don't you think?" More claps followed. Not a wave. Just instinct. Real. People weren't reacting to a performance. They were reacting because someone had finally said what they'd been yelling at their screens for years. Jasmine sat straighter, voice still composed. "I'm not here to humiliate you, Mr. Morgan. That's never been my goal. But I will say this." She leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just grounded. When you've built a career out of questioning everyone else's credibility, you better be ready to defend your own. Piers didn't respond. Not immediately. Instead, he stared down, not at his notes, at nothing, like a man. Realizing too late the rug beneath him was already gone, the director gave a sharp hand signal. "Break! Now!" A producer's voice cracked through the floor manager's earpiece. "Cut it before it gets worse." The screens began fading. Commercials. Cued. The lights dimmed just slightly. But the air hadn't cleared. It hung thick as humidity after a summer storm. Jasmine didn't move, still calm, still composed. Piers adjusted his mic, looked off camera. His face caught somewhere between frustration and something quieter, regret maybe. But no one was looking at him anymore, not even close. All eyes were on Jasmine, not because she shouted, not because she aimed to win, but because she proved, right there in real time, that truth, spoken plainly and without apology, is more powerful than any performance. And the studio, for once, didn't try to spin it. They just let her speak. It wasn't what happened on camera that changed everything. It was what came after. The cameras had cut, but the impact hadn't. Backstage, producers were scrambling. One was already on the phone with PR. Another was staring at Twitter on her tablet, eyes wide as clips from the segment exploded across the timeline. Barely 3 minutes off air, Jasmine's final lines had already been screen-recorded, subtitled, and reposted by someone inside the control room. Piers Morgan was still, in his seat. His team hovered nearby but didn't speak. He waved them off. This wasn't how he expected things to end. Not humiliated, not live, and definitely not by someone who hadn't raised her voice once. There had been no outburst, no cheap shots. He had been dismantled with nothing but facts, clarity, and poise. In the green room, Jasmine finally exhaled. The kind of breath you only take after holding yourself still under heat. Her assistant Trina stepped in, holding out a buzzing phone. "You're trending," she said. "Already top 5. Hashtags Jasmine owned it." She turned the screen toward her. Jasmine gave a quiet laugh. "That's gonna annoy him," Trina smirked. "Oh, he's livid. Word is he's asking producers why they didn't cut sooner." But Jasmine wasn't celebrating. That wasn't the point. This was never about a personal win. It was about the people who had just seen that segment and, maybe for the first time, felt seen. "I just didn't want him rewriting the story again," she said softly. "Not when so many are still paying the price." Trina nodded. "You didn't just hold your own," she said. "You moved something. Out in the wild, clips were everywhere. One showed Jasmine responding calmly after being labeled too emotional. Another, a side-by-side split screen, contrasted Piers' reactions to 2 different protesters, one black, one white. It was already viral. Commentators from across the spectrum weighed in. A conservative news anchor called her a master class in composure. A progressive podcaster said, "This is the best dismantling of media gaslighting I've seen in 10 years. Even people who didn't normally follow politics were watching. At a bar in Tempe, Arizona, students watched the segment on mute, subtitled, across every screen. In a cramped apartment in Fresno, a high school senior showed it to her mother and said, "She talks like you." That was the shift. Not the applause, not the trending tag, but that quiet flicker of recognition people felt. Seeing someone speak the truth without yelling, without breaking, without changing who she was to be heard. Back at the studio, one of the audio techs approached her carefully, glancing over his shoulder. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. She turned. "For what?" He smiled, small and sincere. "For not making us feel crazy. We've watched people talk in circles on that stage for years. Today was different." Jasmine paused, a little caught off guard. She nodded. "Thank you for saying that." He walked away. For a moment, she just sat there, quiet, absorbing it. Trina came back in, smirking again. "They want you back next month," she said. Jasmine arched an eyebrow. "Same show?" "Yep. Same host. She tilted her head. I'll think about it. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, too quickly for security to redirect. Not paparazzi, not press, just people, teachers, college kids, moms with toddlers, organizers, waiting, watching, hoping to see her just for a second. Jasmine stepped out. She didn't wave, didn't pose, didn't turn this into a moment. She just walked slowly, offering a soft smile and a single nod. Not a performance, a recognition, because this had never been about fame. She hadn't come to be a moment. She came for a conversation and left behind a reminder, one that now echoed in classrooms, on group chats, in living rooms and city buses. You can't silence the truth just because it makes you uncomfortable. But what happened next turned a viral flash into something deeper. By early evening, the raw clip, no background music, no edits, had been viewed over 12 million times. Just Jasmine, facing Piers Morgan, speaking plainly, no filter needed, no production required. It hit because it didn't try to hit. News anchors debated it. Talk. Radio picked it apart. Comment sections ignited. But something subtler and far more powerful was happening elsewhere. In Jackson, Mississippi, a high school debate team stopped practice. Their teacher, Mr. Holloway, usually strict about phones, streamed the clip on the projector. "Watch your posture," he told them. "Watch how she holds her ground." They did. And for the first time in a long time, a segment from a talk show didn't just go viral. It meant something. "That's how you handle pressure," a grandmother in Fort Wayne texted, dropping the link into her church group thread. "This woman speaks for us," she wrote. Even those who didn't fully agree with Jasmine found themselves nodding. She didn't just speak. She led. Calm, clear, unshaken. By 8 p.m., hashtags like Sock Jasmine owned it. Shark Say It Plain and Composure is Power had taken over timelines. But Jasmine hadn't posted a thing. No tweets, no retweets, not a word. She didn't need to. The moment spoke for itself. Meanwhile, Piers Morgan had gone silent. No follow-up segment, no fiery blog. His team issued a templated PR statement about respecting differing opinions and robust dialogue. But no one was buying it. People had seen what happened. No editing bay could clean that up. In her Glendale hotel room that night, Jasmine sat cross-legged on the bed. Her laptop was closed. Her phone buzzed every few seconds. She let it buzz. Trina, across the room, was scrolling through messages. "Your auntie in Baton Rouge said she had to turn her hearing aid down," she grinned. "Said she ain't never heard you that clear before." Jasmine chuckled. "She always says that." "Yeah, but she's right this time," Trina said, looking up. "You were clear. You didn't blink. I think that's what got people." Jasmine nodded slowly, her voice soft. "It's never about volume. It's about being steady." Then came a knock, quiet, uncertain. When Jasmine opened the door, a young black woman stood there, early 20s, blazer with a hotel name tag. "Nervous. I'm sorry," she said, voice small. "I know I'm probably not supposed to, but I saw what you did today, and I wanted to say thank you." Jasmine's expression softened. "You're not bothering me." The woman smiled, barely. "I'm usually the only black girl in the room at meetings here, and I can't tell you how many times I've been told I'm too much, or hard to work with. Watching you today," she swallowed. "I felt less crazy." Jasmine stepped gently out of the doorway. "What's your name?" "Kaylee." "Kaylee," Jasmine said. "Don't you ever let anyone convince you you have to shrink just to make them comfortable. You hear me?" Kaylee nodded, eyes glossy. "Being direct isn't rude," Jasmine said. "Being prepared isn't aggressive. And asking to be treated fairly? That's not asking too much." Kaylee smiled, the kind that builds slowly. "I needed to hear that," she said. "I think a lot of us did. No press, no photos, just two women meeting in a truth too big for words." When Kaylee walked away, Jasmine stood in the doorway a moment longer, then closed it gently behind her. That night, a college student from Baltimore tweeted, "Jasmine didn't argue. She didn't perform. She stood her ground and spoke like my mother would, with facts, with heart, and with grace. That's the bar." Now, it hit 300,000 likes in under 4 hours because it wasn't just a trending topic anymore. It wasn't a media feud. It had become a mirror, a reflection of who we listen to, who we silence, and what power looks like when it doesn't have to shout to be heard. But as powerful as that moment was, it wasn't the applause that mattered most. It was what Jasmine did with the attention the next day that made it count. The sun hadn't yet risen over the San Fernando Valley when she woke. She sat by the hotel window, lukewarm coffee beside her, watching the sky shift from black to gray. Her inbox was chaos. 4 missed calls from her comms director, 2 national morning shows asking for interviews, dozens of texts from people she hadn't heard from in years. Her team wanted her to ride the wave, drop a statement, go viral, get on, every mic. But Jasmine wasn't chasing a moment. Moments fade. She wanted something that lasted. By 8 a.m., she was in a plain black blazer, hair tied back, on Zoom with her district team in Texas. "Morning," she waved. Her chief of staff, Russell, shook his head, smiling. "You blew up the internet, and here you are, logging into housing committee updates like it's a regular Tuesday." "It is Tuesday," Jasmine replied. "And just because folks are tweeting doesn't mean rent got cheaper overnight." That's who she was. Always had been. Back in Burbank, the network's internal chats were on fire. Producers couldn't stop talking about how the interview went, off script, how the room had gone still, how even the quietest stagehand had asked for the raw footage link to show his daughter. Piers Morgan's team went into lockdown. He declined all interviews, canceled a scheduled appearance on another network. A few of his usual defenders started dodging the topic entirely. "It's not about winning or losing," one radio host hedged. "It was a tough conversation. That's what journalism's about." But no one was fooled. Meanwhile, the clip spread. Far beyond politics, teachers posted it, pastors, comedians, Gen Z influencers, sports analysts. An NBA player reposted Jasmine's quote, "Being prepared isn't being aggressive," with the caption, "that part." But Jasmine wasn't focused on likes. That afternoon, she walked into a community center conference room in South Dallas. No cameras, no reporters. Just her, a few staffers, and about 20 parents from the neighborhood. The flyer for the meeting had been printed 2 weeks earlier. Before any interview, before any viral moment, it was titled simply, "Know Your Rights." It was a community legal session with Representative Jasmine Crockett, every seat filled. One mother came with a folder of her son's expired tickets. A man raised a housing complaint. A teenager asked how to organize a school board meeting. Jasmine answered every question the same way she always had, slowly, clearly, without ego. No one mentioned Piers Morgan. She didn't either, because she understood the real impact didn't come from a moment on TV. It came from what people felt the next day, when they had to step back into a world that tried to make them small. Later, that week, she posted a short video on her social media. No music, no filters, just her in her office. "I want to thank everyone who reached out. The love has been overwhelming," she said. "But I hope what stuck with you wasn't just what I said. It's why I said it. I didn't go on that show to go viral. I went to speak for people who don't get invited to tables like that. And I'll keep showing up for them, whether the cameras are on or not." That video hit deeper than the interview. It reminded people this wasn't lightning in a bottle. It was the product of years, of listening, learning, and standing tall, even when the room wanted you to shrink. A teacher in Bakersfield used the clip in class. A nonprofit in Tallahassee asked to include it in organizer training. A teenager in Flagstaff messaged her office. You helped me stand up to my teacher today when she said racism isn't real anymore. I didn't yell. I just told her what I knew. That was the real aftermath. Not silencing someone on TV, but giving others permission to speak with confidence, with clarity, without apology. But even with all that momentum, the final moment Jasmine offered came quietly. No one saw it coming. 2 weeks later, she stood behind a podium in a modest auditorium on the south side of El Paso. No national press, no bright lights, just folding chairs and real people, mothers with strollers, teenagers with notebooks, veterans in baseball caps, elders in their Sunday best. The kind of gathering where someone's uncle runs the sound system from a dusty old laptop. Jasmine hadn't come to give a speech. She came to listen. For over an hour, they told their stories of housing rejections, traffic stops, missed paychecks, and broken promises. None of it was new. All of it mattered. Then someone finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air. How do we keep going when it feels like no one's really listening? Jasmine walked to the mic. She looked tired, but not worn out. The kind of tired that comes from working, not performing. She paused, met the crowd's eyes. They don't listen, she said, until you make them. The room stilled. You won't always have a mic. You won't always get a camera. But that doesn't mean your story isn't worth telling. She glanced down, then back up. I got lucky that day on TV. But I didn't win anything, I just reminded people we don't owe anyone softness when we're telling the truth. A ripple of quiet agreement moved through the room. Too often we're told to shrink to be heard, to be nicer, quieter, gentler. But they never ask that of the ones ignoring our pain. Isn't that something? She leaned forward slightly. Here's what I want you to carry. You don't have to raise your voice to raise the standard. A woman in the second row wiped her eyes. A man in the back nodded, arms crossed, listening deeper now. We're told to wait, to phrase it better, to be patient. But if we keep waiting for perfect conditions, we'll grow old waiting. She let the words hang. I didn't speak on that show to clap back. I spoke because I was done asking for permission to be taken seriously. And that was the point, laid bare. This wasn't about fame or going viral. It was about the ripple effect of truth, spoken calmly, firmly, in rooms that weren't designed to hear it. Courage, Jasmine said, isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quietest sentence in the room that changes everything. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was real. The kind that sticks with you after the chairs are folded and the lights are off. Later in the hallway, a skinny teenager approached her, phone in hand, nervous. Do you remember that clip that went viral? He asked. She smiled. I do. He nodded. I didn't think people like you existed. She looked him in the eye. People like you exist, she said. I just happened to have a mic that day. That was the lesson. The power wasn't in a single moment, a headline, a trending hashtag. It was in how that truth traveled, from a stage in Burbank to a living room in Cincinnati, to a cafeteria in Albuquerque, to a park bench in Milwaukee. Those words weren't hers anymore. They belonged to anyone who'd ever been called too loud, too blunt, too much, just for speaking plainly. When Jasmine left the auditorium, she didn't take the applause with her. She left it in the hands of the people who needed it more, and as she walked to her car, the only sound was the rhythm of her own footsteps. Quiet, firm, unmistakably grounded, because real change doesn't always echo. Sometimes it settles in the silence, after the truth has landed.